A few years ago, my family moved into a house that had a raised bed garden. In the past, it had been flourishing, but remained unused for the last 5 years. Since plants had always been one of my passions, I naturally attempted to use the garden. A very important question was, how can this unused garden be brought back to life? The very first step in rejuvenating a garden is to check the quality of the soil, and according to MiniFarming, Self-Sufficiency on a quarter acre, inexpensive soil tests are available to test the pH, nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium content of soil.
Yes, soil tests are a very useful thing because they tell you things like pH and nitrogen, potassium, phosphorus, all sorts of things that are really important to have in your soil to allow your plants to flourish. So this test that I've used a few times is called Rapid Test Soil Test Kit. So we've used this on a few of these beds, I think. But basically, for the pH test, it has a fill line for the soil. So you put the soil to that bottom line. Then you do the rest with water. Then they have these little, they look like pills. You open them up and pour them in. With the rest being filled with water, it'll turn a certain color. If it's reddish, it's going to be very acid, and if it's a very dark green, it's going to be alkaline. So yeah, that's one of the ways that you can gauge different things that are in your soil.
Amendments, including fertilizers and compost, are available to regain nutrients that have been lost. For example, blood meal adds nitrogen, rock phosphate adds phosphorus, and seaweed adds potassium.
So adding in amendments like compost and fertilizers are also really useful. For example, let's see, this is a 15-30-15 fertilizer, meaning 15% nitrogen, 30% phosphorus, 15% potassium. And what those different things do is, so nitrogen contributes a lot to like leafy green growth. So things like cabbages, you want a good amount of nitrogen to get nice leaves, good growth, good cabbage head. Phosphorus, that generally contributes to flowers and I think roots. Potassium is what will get fruits to grow really big. So if you're doing something like a giant pumpkin, which I attempted but didn't really do correctly, you want to use a lot of potassium fertilizer to get a really big fruit.
It is likely that unused soil will need rehydration, so it should be watered well.
And my research has told me that watering soil is actually really important when it hasn't been used for a while. Actually, one of the videos I saw said that after a while it could not really be able to take in water, so you want to make sure if it hasn't been used in a long time that you're really getting it watered.
Another step to keep the soil in use is to plant quick-growing plants such as beets or radishes. They keep the soil in use until it is time to plant the next planned crop.
Radishes. Cover crops can also contribute nutrients to the soil. For example, growing a legume like peas or beans, that'll give nitrogen to the soil. Now, one thing you want to remember when you're doing cover crops like that is that if they go to flower and fruit, it's gonna just use up the nitrogen that it would have put into the soil. So if you're growing something like peas for a cover crop for the purposes of it adding nitrogen through the nodes that it can do a relationship with bacteria, you want to not let it go to fruit if you want it to actually keep that nitrogen in the soil. So that's one thing that I'm gonna need to remember as I try to do some cover crops in the future in some of these beds.
Mulch can be a useful addition as, according to Kevin Espiritu of Epic Gardening, it benefits the plants and soil.
So the purposes we're using it for in our garden is weed suppression. But it can also keep water in the soil because it's gonna keep the soil cooler and not as exposed to like the sun. But we're actually not mainly using this mulch for in the raised beds or doing it in between beds, because you can see there are a lot of weeds.
Once the soil has been restored, it needs to be maintained. One method for maintaining good, healthy soil is by using crop rotations and cover crops.
Radishes.
MiniFarming states that you never follow a crop with another crop from the same botanical family. It also says that you want to alternate deep-rooted crops, like carrots, with shallow-rooted crops, like lettuce. In my crop rotation plan, I generally make sure that main crop plants of the same families do not succeed one another year after year. This is done in order to prevent disease.